and welcome back to the HE Enable podcast. This show is all about sharing our experiences of disability, long-term health conditions, and neurodiversity in the British higher education system. I'm Kath, and this week I am joined by Maddy. Maddy is a part-time BSc student in computing who came to higher education after spending time on their career. It is a pleasure to have them on today, and I cannot wait to get started with them. So, Maddy, please can you just introduce yourself and share a little about your background in higher education?
Yes, absolutely. So, hi, I'm Maddy. I'm currently studying a BSc honours in computing and IT with the Open University. It's with a focus in software design, although I now ironically work in software testing. Um, I I'm currently in industry. I'm studying part time with the Open University. Started in 2019. And I was the kind of person who was a little bit too impatient to wait till I graduated to get into industry. So I got about 2 years in and I was like, right, I need to get into industry, started doing some boot camps, etc. Got back into industry. Um, Before studying, I had a career in operations and finance. So I was working sort of up in London for about 8, 10 years, multiple roles across, well, starting off as a cleaner and then building up to receptionist, customer service advisor, to an office manager and an operational analyst, which I enjoyed, but it got a little bit boring. And then unfortunately in 2016, I got very unwell. I developed a chronic illness called idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And after that, I had to spend some time sort of thinking about what I wanted to do next, which is what brought me back to education. I didn't go straight from school to education. Part of that is my ADHD. I was too burnt out with high school at the time. So I came to school a lot later. Turns out it was the perfect time for me. I wasn't meant to go to university earlier. Um, and yeah, I should be graduating this year, all going well with my final project. Fingers
Oh,
crossed.
that's so exciting. Yeah, I've been so excited to have you on because I so for context, I got in touch with Maddie via LinkedIn and I looked at your profile and I was like, this is the most diverse thing I've ever seen. It was absolutely wonderful. So I was like, I need this person on. This is gonna be great. So let's move on to our next question. If you're comfortable saying, how has your disability or disabilities impacted your experience of higher education so far?
So I had a really interesting journey when it came to my disabilities and education. So when I started my degree, I was ill with my idiopathic intracranial hypertension, which I'll shorten to IIH from now on because it is a bit of a mouthful. But I was ill with that. And so I was managing sort of chronic pain, energy levels when I first started. So I wasn't working, or if I was working, it was only part time, about 8 hours a week, and then doing my part time study. However, what I found as I was going further and further into my uni degree, I was also discovering that I may be neurodivergent. So, in the typical sort of COVID pattern in about 2020, everything came to a head. And all of a sudden, realized that something's not right here. The things that I'm struggling with are not all right. And I managed to pursue an ADHD diagnosis and got diagnosed. Interestingly enough, my younger brother and sister also got diagnosed in the same year. So it was a full shot for our entire family. So it changed my way of studying completely because I knew that I was struggling to take in some information. I knew that I was struggling with time management, with some of the assignment things, but I just assumed that was me struggling with it, and that was just going to be a difficult part of university, and it was going to be what made my time harder. And then finding out I had ADHD, it kind of changed everything so much. It changed my approach to education. Um, and looking back, um, it actually completely impacted when I started higher education study as well. I left high school, so for background, I'm Australian. Our schooling system is a little bit different. We have primary school, high school, and then you go into uni or TAFE, which is similar to college. I had a placement to go into university at that time, but I was, what I now realize, was completely burnt out with education because of the fact that I had undiagnosed and unsupported ADHD. I passed with enough scores to do really well, but I couldn't face doing any more education. So having that sort of 8 to 10 years in industry was enough time for me to kind of learn myself a little bit better and then be ready to come back to study in something I actually enjoyed. And then also understand myself a little bit better so I could start seeing what I was struggling with and recognizing why I was struggling with it. So it made it really interesting, but also enjoyable. Like I managed to work it to my benefit once I realized what was going on. Once I recognized my ADHD, I was able to go, okay, well, I'm maybe not so good at these things, but I was also able to find other things that I was really good at, and other structures that I was really good at. So yeah, it's been interesting so far.
That's fair. I think we must have got our ADHD diagnosis around a similar time. I think that with like societies and stuff at uni, obviously it's different from the open uni because I was a lot more in person. I was like, I could keep myself kind of going. And then as soon as everything stopped, I was like, oh, wait, this isn't right. This isn't normal. This isn't the same kind of mutual suffering that I should be sharing with my peers. You
Yes.
know? Yeah, no, I relate to that. It's different points in our life, but similar time, date wise. It's right.
Yeah, and there's always that moment, that breaking point where you suddenly go, wait a minute, like exactly like you mentioned, I'm not suffering the same way everyone else is. It's that extra level, and once you realize that, you can't go back, and it sends you down the rabbit hole, I guess.
Yeah, especially when so much of higher education culture is kind of like, especially if you look at like Instagram, it's like, oh, I've got this is terrible, this is suffering. And like, oh, this is just like a thing. This is a thing
Mm,
that happens at uni, is a little bit of suffering. Yeah, no, that's not normal.
no.
Not to that extent, absolutely not. Burnout sucks. Right.
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah.
As
Not
someone
pretty.
who's been through multiple burnout cycles in my life, yes, it sucks.
It absolutely categorically sucks. Right.
Yeah.
So you've kind of spoken about when you started uni. I'm going to pull it a little further back in time to about how your experience was accessing higher education from a
Mm.
disability standpoint. So kind of like, how did you find that?
Yeah, so when I was deciding to go back to university, I was very unwell at the time, so I knew that I couldn't attend a physical university. I also knew from sort of understanding myself is that I didn't think I'd be the sort of person that would be able to get information from a lot of lectures, for example. So sitting in a hall, taking in a lot of information that's just spoken to me. Turns out I was right. I'd kind of learnt that over the years. And so when I was looking at what I wanted to do for university, there was a couple of big factors for me. One of them was I wanted a university that was flexible. So one that I could, if I needed to, take time off and come back to without losing too much information. I wanted a university that gave you the resources and let you study mostly at your own pace, which is what I found with the Open University. And also, if I was going to be studying part time and away from a site, I didn't want to have to be paying the same amount as someone who was studying on site as well, which is again why the OU came in. Um, the OU is also very well known for its supportive education system and for the fact that it does cater to, I guess, non-traditional students like me. And I genuinely think I wouldn't be at this point where I'm going to be graduating in a couple of months if I wasn't studying somewhere like the OU. Because, for example, during COVID, when education changed drastically for everyone, it didn't change for me. It, it was exactly the same as what I'd been studying. to be honest, it was actually a bit better for me during COVID because I was able to focus a lot more on it. Um, and it was a big part of the education experience was picking somewhere that actually was more adaptable than your typical uni experience. So it wasn't a full-time degree that goes, oh yeah, you can study part-time, but you have to go to lectures at this time. You have to go to lectures, you have to be at this particular place for a certain number of hours and try and fit that in around work. Because I knew I was always going to be fitting in my work and my health as well. So
Yeah. I know that OU's been doing very big ad campaigns for a few years about career switching and flexibility, and I'm really glad that they do because there's definitely there's always been a place for it. I remember when I kind of failed my Oxford degree the first time. I'm also gonna be graduating in a couple months. I spent was it like I just spent some time just going through the free OU courses and just acquiring like random life skills. So I found that they were also like a really good part of getting me out of, I guess, a bit of a rut that I got myself into from like all of the failure. So I think the OU always has its place in someone's educational journey, whether they realize it or not.
absolutely, and they make information accessible. I mean, I could talk about the good things about the OU. I mean, there's going to be some not so good things that we'll talk about later in the interview as well. But you know, for the most part, the OU makes education more accessible, regardless of whether you officially study with them or not. And that's something that really drew me to them.
That's fair. I mean, so obviously you also did kind of industry stuff before this. Did you
Hmm.
find that you were more confident in accessing university after being in industry, or do you think it was mainly just the time?
Oh, I was terrified going to university. So when I was working in industry, I got to a point where I was starting to get a little bit bored with where I was in my career. The way I like to describe it is some of the jobs that I was working, I knew exactly what I was doing day in, day out for the next 6 months in time. And that doesn't work very well with my brain. It just doesn't. And it led to a lot of burnout and a lot of job turnover as well, which gives me a very diverse CV, but also was very stressful at different points.
Yeah.
But thinking about going to university was not a new thing. It wasn't only brought on by the fact that I was ill. I had been thinking about it on and off. I had been thinking about changing careers for quite a while. It was just when I got ill, it was almost like the universe was giving me that free pass of going, here you go, here's a hard reset. You have a chance to completely redesign what your life is going to be for the rest of your working life. What are you going to do with it? And so it was the time when, regardless of how scared I was, I had to make a decision of what I needed to do because there was no way I was going to go back to my previous career because even post COVID, those careers weren't as flexible, they weren't as disability friendly. A lot of the promotion tracks were based on you putting in more and more hours, which is not something I would ever be able to do. And so, yeah, it was just the universe said, look, here, I'm going to clear your slate completely, make up your mind what you want to do the scary thing because, it's going to pay off. And it turned out it did. It was absolutely terrifying. The idea of going into that much student debt was terrifying,
Yep.
especially being someone who's not a UK citizen as well. I'm a permanent resident, but going into that much debt for uni was terrifying. That's what put me off. And also starting a degree that was 6 years long. Like I put it off because I was like, oh my gosh, 6 years. It's gonna take so long. Why would I even want to do that? And then it got to the point where those 6 years are gonna pass anyway. And I'm looking back at it now, coming out of that almost 6 years, and I'm like, why didn't I start it sooner? Because then I would have finished sooner. But obviously it wasn't the right time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't do this, and they start like kicking themselves and like regretting stuff. And I keep I had different kind of medical periods in my life where I was just like, well, I'm kind of meeting myself where I am right now, and yeah, I could have done this sooner, but also like I probably would have had to have been much harder on myself if it hadn't come naturally, and it probably wouldn't have been healthy for me in the long term.
Yes. And see, this is something that I think a lot of people with this, a lot, this is something that anyone with a disability or a neurodiverse condition needs to remember as well, is that you're not always playing on the same field as everyone else. You know, you can compare yourself to everyone else as much as you want, but you can't. So I can't compare my experience with other people my age, because other people my age don't have the same disabilities I do. They don't need the same accommodations I do. They don't need the same amount of rest in a week as I do. And so it's trying to step away from that thought pattern of being in competition with everyone else and changing it to being in competition with yourself, which is not easy, especially when you're studying, and everything is marked and everything is graded, and you're compared against your other colleagues all the time. But the best thing you can do is compare against your own progress, not anyone else's, because nobody else is in your situation.
Absolutely. I also think like yes, compare against yourself, but also if you're having a bad patch, don't necessarily compare yourself to when you're well. Like any kind of disability, long-term health condition, or diversity is never linear. And I
Mm.
think that you need to cut yourself some slack if you're not absolutely perfect or like you were last time, because you're always going to be in a different state of being. I'm really glad we had that little tangent. That was really, I think, very productive.
I think
Right,
so.
I've got the next question here. I definitely think I already know at least some of the answer to this. But do you think that studying remotely has suited you? Are there any positives or negatives that you did not consider about remote learning before starting?
Oh, remote learning absolutely suited me down to the ground. Absolutely suited me down to the ground. Don't get me wrong, there's things that I'm a little bit sad that I missed out on, not studying in person. But I also know that if I studied in person, I wouldn't be finishing my uni degree. So, as much as I missed out on some things like being on site, being more involved with in person events, maybe sitting in an actual physical library with other students and meeting more students on my course, as much as I missed out on those things, studying remotely was the difference between me being able to study or not. Um, so that in itself outweighs any of the negatives for me. I still got lots of chances to meet other students, so probably not to the same degree as if I was going to a brick and mortar university. But for example, I was on a team that launched a rocket at the Macrahanish Space Center a couple of years ago. We built so it was part of a rocket launch competition. We were in the 1.5 kilometer category. We built a rocket, I built the onboard computer, and we launched it and we won our category. So I still met other students. They were on completely different degrees from me, but I still met other OU students. I think over the entire 12-month project that we were doing that, we met each other in person maybe 4 times, but we learned really useful skills of how to project manage online. And so we did all that project management online, which is even more important in the workplace now.
Yeah, I'm guessing
So
did that. Sorry, was that like pre-COVID or was that like around that
that
time?
was post-COVID,
Okay,
post-COVID. So we were coming out of COVID. I think
gotcha.
it was Mac 22, so in 2022.
Okay, cool.
Um, but yeah, it was a really cool opportunity. I've been in other online clubs as well. Sort of got involved in other online networks. But yeah, studying remotely was amazing for me. I still had access to a digital library and pretty much any resources that I needed to get access to. I still had some fantastic tutors that I worked with over the years. I didn't really lose anything with that. And like I mentioned, when COVID happened, study didn't really change for me because the OU was already set up for it. It literally, they took it in their stride. Nothing really changed other than the in-person tutorials that were held like 4 times a year. And they've just been online, and they've been online ever since. And it's really not changed that much.
Yeah, that was probably a very good time to start at the OU. Despite everything going on in the world, I think you definitely got something good out of that.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yeah, so you mentioned that you've obviously been working alongside your studies. I want to ask a little bit about that. So, like, how have you learned to balance your degree with your career? Did it come naturally? Did it take a little bit of time, or is it still like a work in
Well, funnily enough, it's a work in progress. It still is, but my university journey is so tied in with my health journey. So when I started in 2019, I was very unwell. I wasn't really working at the time. Um, I was on and off bed bound. All I could manage was my uni work. Then in that first year, I got a part-time role with an amazing company locally, working, I think, 4 hours a week. And then over the next 3 or 4 years with them, I built up from 4 hours a week all the way up to 30 hours a week with them, slowly, gradually, with hiccups along the way. But as my medication was working better, as my health was getting better, I was able to build up how much work I was doing. And so, because I had that, I had, in a weird way, the privilege of bringing up my work hours as well as doing my OU work. It was very much a work in progress. Everything kind of settled in with each other, and I found ways to make it all fit. And then once I finally got to the point where I returned to full-time work, it that by that time it had already come naturally to me to find ways to fit my study in. So, if I was traveling in for the day for uni, I'd make sure I had all my reading loaded onto my tablet at the time, so that my job that I was working at the time, it was a 2.5 hour commute each way. So I would do my studying on the train. I would fit things in as and when I needed to. Obviously, it was getting later in my degree, so maybe my scores suffered a little bit, but I was still able to just fit it in where needed. Um, what really helped is my wife was amazingly supportive as well. So we carved out a schedule of, certain evenings were for uni, and Saturday mornings, because she also worked, um, were entirely for uni. So it started to fit in naturally. Admittedly, this final project is turning out to be the most difficult one, of trying to fit it in with my full-time position, and then also with a fairly unstructured unit. My previous units have been very structured. They've been very much like, read this, and this, and then do the assignment. This final one, because it's a project that you set yourself, not as structured. So, you know, funnily enough, my ADHD brain is not dealing with that particularly well, and fitting that in around work has been interesting. But yeah, it is a constant work in progress. Um, but it's doable. And I'm able to check in with my tutors and say sometimes when I'm struggling a little bit, I've got to the point where I've had to try and work around my perfectionism as well, and just be like, okay, no, my health comes first. I will get whatever marks I get in this final unit, but my health comes first. As long as I pass this unit, then I'm still going to get a good overall grade. Um, but yeah, it was there was a couple of instances when I first started studying where things were a little bit close to the wire. So I remember my very first assignment that I submitted. I was working on my assignment, and then I ended up in hospital for like 3 days before it was due. luckily, I had enough of it done to submit it. But because of that being my very first experience of submitting a university assignment, being that all of a sudden I had the rug pulled under me, that was built into all of my assignments thereafter. So I was that insufferable student that could never submit the report on the day that it's actually due. I had to be the one freaking out and submitting it a day or two beforehand because I never knew. If my health was going to go, I had to be working on my assignment gradually. I couldn't be one of those students that worked on it all last minute, because if I did that, it could have unraveled completely if I'd had another health crisis. So it was working with, working against my natural rhythms of doing everything last minute to accommodate my other health issues. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds like quite the balance. Definitely. That sounds like a juggling act that would be very hard to do. Kudos. That is, yeah, for sure. That's a lot. I think you've alluded a little bit to this, but have you encountered any obstacles during your time in higher education? And like, did you overcome those? And if so, how?
Yeah, so I've had a few obstacles, mainly due to um, due to burnout, really. So it would be when my systems that I'd set up so that I was able to balance work and study and still resting. When those systems failed for whatever reason, I would hit burnout quite a lot. And it almost always happened in the final sort of quarter of the study year, as it probably does for most people. But I would, every year, I would burn out so bad um, that it would be a real struggle to pull it back. Um, what doesn't help is that I would often burn out with work as well. So it's finding that real balance of working out. I mean, working out that work-life balance is really, really difficult. Um, Also, one thing that I've always struggled with is recognizing early when I need to stop and rest. So when I'm going into burnout or a health crisis or a flare up, there will be early warning signs, and I'll be pushing through it, especially when it comes if I've got a deadline coming up or something like that, and I'll push through it. And then all of a sudden, rather than stopping and taking a break for a day or two and then getting back to it, I've pushed through and then I'm out of action for like 2, 3 weeks. And so that's something that I struggled with quite a lot. When I first got diagnosed with ADHD, I had a really interesting time getting that reported to the OU. So the OU was extremely supportive, I've got to say. But as part of that remote learning, there was kind of only so much that they could really offer as support. I only ever applied for DSA once. So when I first got diagnosed, I applied for DSA. I got some of the standard things to help me out. So I got a laptop, got some adjustments there. I got access to a study coach, which she was brilliant, but we didn't really mesh very well. It didn't really work very well for my study style, so that didn't last too long. And there was no real benefit for me for reapplying to DSA as much as I would have loved to, and got benefit of it. I don't know whether that was just my lack of understanding at the time, but there also wasn't a huge amount of information on what I could get via DSA. What I also found really interesting, and I imagine this is the same for most students, is that once I report my disability, the big the the big adjustment that was made was, here, have some extra time on your exams.
Yep.
And that doesn't help me. that does not help me at all. Well, it does in the fact that it reduces my anxiety. So I am the sort of person that I will always finish my exams early, just because that's the way my brain works. But I also only about half of my units had exams. The rest of them were just written assignments. And I was able to get extensions on some of my assignments, but I could never get an extension on my final assignment because that was a concrete date. So, if I did end up getting extensions on my earlier assignments, all that would do would be messing me up for my final assignment anyway. So, yeah, it was one of those things where I kind of wish that they had more of a portfolio of support to offer rather than just a blanket, yeah, have some extra time for your exam, especially now that I've done a lot more work in neurodiversity advocacy in work, and how we can make workplaces more accessible. I've now seen that there are plenty of ways that education can be made more accessible beyond just extending exam times. There's a lot more that can be done from that.
I'm actually really interested in this because obviously it's hard with like remote learning to think about what you do. If this isn't putting you on the spot too much, what kind of adjustments would you be thinking of?
So, I mean, the first one for me would be having a tutor. So, if you declare on your record that you maybe need additional support needs, have the tutor ask questions and say, like, is there anything else that I can do to support? What I found quite a lot is that for most of my tutors, it was kind of a blanket email that was sent at the start of the unit, but there were no sort of questions from the tutor of going, okay, I know you've got this condition, it's on your record, I've been alerted to it. What can I do to help you? What sort of support? Even just something small like that would have helped a lot, because it would have signposted that someone was on your side quite early, and it gave you that space to ask for help. What I also would have liked is possibly some more support for I mean, it depends on what you're looking for access for. The OU was actually pretty good with this. They would provide a lot of audio copies of any study material. They'd have apps that were adjustable for reading focuses, etc. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that would have made the difference is just having tutors that would have just checked in and gone, is everything all right? Can I do something to help? It would have made a big difference. That's all I can think of off the top of my head at the moment.
Totally
I'm sure
fair.
there's other things, but
No, that's all good. I've just become acutely aware of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you questions. We might rapid fire these a little bit more, but please
okay.
don't miss out any key details because I'm sure our listeners want to hear everything because you have such a wonderful story. So, did you have any like clubs, societies, or initiatives that made a significant positive difference for you? I know you mentioned the Rocket Group, which was awesome. Was there anything else?
Yeah, so not so much university specific. So when I first started, I did go through and I joined a couple of Discord servers that were set up. But then there was a lot of information that was coming in, and it was very overwhelming whilst I was still trying to focus on my study and everything else. So I never really got anything out of so much the OU online groups that were offered. However, there were other clubs that I got involved in. So I got very involved in BCS, which is the British Computing Society. So I'm now a member with them. I was part of their inaugural. I was part of the inaugural group that put together the Pride Network, and I served as the education liaison officer for a while. When study got a little bit too much, I stepped back, but I'm now volunteering with them again for SIGIST, which is the special interest group in software testing, as the inclusion officer. That was really helpful because I got a chance to meet people in industry. I found out about the Lovelace Colloquium through BCS as well, which, if you've not heard of it, it is a poster competition for academic students where they can come in and present on basically anything related to tech. I've seen people create posters on digital tattoos, all sorts, and it's just a case to it's a place to share knowledge, but also to nerd out a little bit as well and get a bit of exposure. And yeah, I got so much information and so much confidence from doing stuff like that and starting to say yes to all these opportunities that came around. I even presented at Parliament at a Picked For event as well. So it wasn't quite with the OU, but it was a club that I was part of as I was sort of building up my education.
That's really cool. We love any opportunity for people to nerd out. I think that is a wonderful thing to have. Absolutely. Um, so I tend to ask my next question because I know sometimes people have different answers to this, and it also like counters a lot of romanticization of disability. But have you experienced any instances of your disabilities proving helpful in higher education?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So not so much with my IIH. My IIH is what it is. I can't do much about it. But when it comes to my ADHD and how I think about things, that was really, really useful for me in a higher education setting. I was able to problem solve. I was able to pick up concepts very quickly. I was able to sort of really yeah, really pick up things quickly. And even if I'd, for example, taken a week off for my health, I was able to catch up pretty quick. A lot of the times it was because my brain was skipping over big chunks of the text that I needed to read, but I was still able to get up to speed. And if I didn't have something, I was able to find it elsewhere. Um, I also, yeah, a lot of it was that sort of drive of, okay, I'm stuck, what am I going to do? And then that problem solving kicked in for me, and that was great. That got me through a lot. There was a lot of I mean, I'm not a massive fan of talking about disability superpowers, but I do always think there are good and bad sides to neurodiversity that need to be spoken about because there are a lot of strengths. We could be here all day talking about it. It's a big part of the advocacy that I do, but there are a lot of strengths that are related to it as long as the, negatives are supported.
Yeah, and it's also a wonderful thing we could talk for hours because it's a special interest, and that's a part of neurodiversity, and it's probably the reason this podcast exists. Also, as an English major, I painfully relate to skipping over sections of text. Um, thank goodness I dual majored, or I would have been in a lot of trouble. Dual honors degree, but it's a combined. It's not dual honors. It's not quite US, but whatever.
Yeah.
So is there anything you wish you'd known about university before you started?
I guess the one thing is that I wish I'd known is take up whatever study support your uni offers, especially if you're new to university. If the university library is putting on courses on how to research properly, go to them. If they're putting on courses on how to write reports and essays, go to them because it's not academic language is not something that comes easy. It is something that you have to work on, especially if, like me, you're coming from a professional background where you've learned a whole different jargon of language to work in the professional world. And then all of a sudden you're learning how to get marked in an academic sense. It is very, very different. And it's not even like standard schoolwork either. Take whatever resources the university gives you where you can without getting overwhelmed and without sacrificing your health and well-being, of course.
Yeah, that's very sage advice. Final question, we've made it. So many tangents, so many good times. Um, what is one key takeaway that you would like listeners to remember from your story?
So the one key takeaway I'd like everyone to take away is that it's not too late to change things. It's never too late to change things. So I retrained quite late. I was kind of forced to by health things. But you can spend your whole life thinking, oh, I can't change things because it's too late now. Oh, I should have done this in my 20s. I should have done this, when I was back at school. No, you can do things at any point. There's no reason why you can't say yes to opportunities that come along. There's no reason why you can't follow your sparkle. If you are sitting there day to day absolutely miserable and you have something that really lights you up and gets you going of a day, there's no reason why you can't follow that sparkle. It's scary, it's difficult, but I'm not being funny. Life is scary and difficult. So you might as well face the scary and difficult stuff to get to where you want to go. And it's not too late to do that. It's never too late. I've met people that were retraining all the way up to their 60s. It is never too late.
I love that. That is one. I kind of rush things in my I'm in my mid-20s now, and yeah. I'm sure I will experience a lot of that in the future. Maybe it isn't quite my time yet, but maybe in a few years. Yeah, for sure. Right, Maddie, thank you so much for coming on. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to do a little bit of my spiel now. So the HG Enable podcast is all about obviously sharing the experiences of disability, long-term health conditions, and neurodiversities in the British higher education system. If you have been in the British higher education system and that sounds like you, I would love to hear your story. You can reach out on the email at henabled@gmail.com. Please do reach out. I want to hear all of your wonderful stories. Maddie, thank you again. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.